Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of Heels and Helmets SHEMAKERS. I am your hostess and the founder and CEO of Heels and Helmets, Shavonna Williams. For more than 2 decades, I have worked in marketing and communications for Fortune 500 companies, nonprofit, politics, and 5 major sports leagues. Of course, you can guess, I have been in plenty of boardrooms where I was the only woman. I'm working to change that. My goal is to get more women in the boardroom with equal pay. Throughout my career, I've been fortunate enough to work with incredible women who are not only killing the game, but share my passion to help you develop your winning game plan to succeed in business and life. These women, SHEMAKERS, are joining me to have conversations with you to help you develop your playbook. So what is a SHEMAKER? A SHEMAKER is a man or woman who is successful and talented and helps women succeed. You are a SHEMAKER, and I am here to help you get in the end zone and win. Let's meet tonight's SHEMAKER coach. Bev Carey is the founder of Carey Communications and a global experience strategist, having provided leadership and operational counsel to 8 Olympic and Paralympic Games. She holds strategic positions on high-stakes projects across the entertainment, sports, tech, and nonprofit sectors. Bev specializes in integrated and complex program development, experience curation, major event operations, and crisis management planning. Beverly is an innovator, fixer, and a problem solver. She believes in a clean and modern aesthetic and in the power of a space, an experience, and an integrated and well-rehearsed plan to inspire people into positive transformation. Beverly is also the founder of sister company Live Alive, a modern empowerment lifestyle brand with a mission to create a movement of self-actualized and wholehearted women through a peer-based mastermind, purposeful accountability mentorship series. The Live Alive series provides a framework created to turn simple curiosities or long-held aspirations into step-by-step accountable monthly action plans designed to fulfill goals in 1 year. Moving your someday I will toward this year I did. The ultimate mission of Live Alive series is to establish a movement of aggregated women who have not only adapted the Live Alive mentality of aligning aspirations with personal values in their own lives, but have also committed to the collective growth of other women. Beverly also serves as the director of the Atlanta chapter of Women in Sports and Events, WISE, within mentorship program. She is a founding member of Lola Women's Club and Community and an avid runner and multi-marathon finisher. Beverly lives in Atlanta with her husband, 2 stepchildren, and a curious golden retriever. I met Beverly working together on WISE Atlanta. She is a phenomenal woman, and I'm so excited that she is here with us this evening to share. As you heard in her bio, she is committed to not only developing women, but making sure that women are also committed to developing and helping other women. So, SHEMAKERS, get ready. Tell us where you're watching from, and welcome SHEMAKER coach, Bev Carey. Good evening, Bev. How are you?
Wonderful. Hi, Shavonna. Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Oh, it is very fun. We've been talking about getting together since we first met. So I'm so happy that we are able to have you on SHEMAKERS this evening. And I am looking forward to you sharing all about Live Alive and the event next week, which I'm happy to participate in.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited that we get to make this exchange. We've talked about it for so long, and I'm very excited to have you next week in our 4 Women, 4 Stories event, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But people will get to not only see you as a host, but also hear your story. So I'm really looking forward to that opportunity.
Definitely. Well, considering that you have worked on 8 Olympics and Paralympics, I could do a show with you on each one of those experiences. So I am just going to jump right into it, Bev. How did you get started in sports?
Yeah, you know, it's a little bit of a wacky story. I was back in in the day, I'll say it's been a couple of years. I was in Boston and out of college working in advertising, and I had the great opportunity to work on some print advertising campaigns for John Hancock, who at the time was an Olympic sponsor for the games when they were in Sydney in Australia. And so, kind of working very, very, very third party behind the scenes on some of that. And it piqued my interest. And, I thought I'm really, really curious about this sort of whole Olympic experience. And I had grown up kind of a recreational / competitive figure skater most of my childhood and teenage life into college. And so I had always had the Olympics as part of my kind of vernacular in that way. And so when those two worlds collided, there was an opportunity to participate in the application process for an internship when the Olympic Games were going to be in Salt Lake City. And it was a sport internship, meaning working with the kind of sport team, field of play, athletes, all of that, in figure skating and short track speed skating. So it was something I had to kind of go for. And, I thought, this is a whim. I'm going to put my application in, and that's going to be that. And, unbeknownst to me, surprisingly, I got a call about it. And fast forward, I quit my job. This was going to be an unpaid internship from that point forward, which is about 1.5 to 2 years before the games. And I thought, well, I'm doing it. It's a chance of a lifetime, quitting my job, moving across country to Salt Lake City, to Utah. And, I'll figure it out. I'll do whatever I have to do to sort of, figure out how to pay my bills and all of that. And I just dove in and I said, look, I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do. If it's pick up trash, I'll pick up trash. I'll do whatever. And I just fell in the hands of this amazing, amazing team. And very luckily, I ended up getting hired for those games and working the games in Salt Lake. And so that sort of kicked it off many moons ago.
Oh, just a few years ago. I know you started
just a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Considering that you participated in figure skating for so many years, did you ever see yourself working on the business side of sports?
Not really. I mean, I think it was always interesting for me, that idea. I think I really understood what you could do in sports at that time. I was on the competitor side of things. I was curious when I would go to compete at any kind of event, how things were working, how were they moving us, from hotel to bus to the venue, back of house, to onto the field of play. And all those things were very interesting for me as a kid, but I didn't really think about that I could have a career in that. I went to college, I was a psychology major. That's sort of the line I saw myself going in, is becoming a therapist. And, just kind of bounced around, honestly, out of college into advertising randomly, and then into this internship into sport. And then I sort of started to realize, wow, there's a lot to do here. Also, the Olympic Games being in Atlanta in '96, when I had just graduated college, and being there completely as a spectator, but taking in that spectacle and realizing how much was going on, and thinking there's so many businesses and organizations, and the sponsorship piece and the operations piece, there's just a lot here to explore. And so that's really when it kind of came alive for me, less so as a kid.
Very interesting, because I have a very similar story. The 1996 Olympics really kicked off my career and interest in sports marketing as well. I actually interned on the games here in Atlanta.
I did not know that. Oh, very cool.
So I saw all of the different businesses working together and diverse people coming together. And I really wanted to be a part of that, and just saw how you can definitely, on the business side, launch a product, but from a social standpoint, create change by connecting, diverse people.
Absolutely. I think, the Olympics are a great example of that. We see it as we kind of move more towards what we have now with refugee teams and things like that. And it's an opportunity really to bring the world together. It's not always without challenge. Definitely. It's not always without, it's not perfect every time. Certainly wouldn't say that, but that opportunity to bring, people together around sport and to be inspired by those performances and those athletes, and by the culture Olympiad and all the things that go with it, are pretty remarkable.
So your first internship, the Utah Winter Olympics, what were some of the most exciting things that you learned?
I mean, so many things that I learned straight away and all the way through. I mean, it was just a learning experience one after the other. I think working in that team in Salt Lake was just so full of talent, in this industry, people who had done other major events. I felt like a sponge all the time, just trying to absorb everything that was being put before me, and opportunities that I had, whether that was, being able to take what I had known about the sport of figure skating and apply that, just to have a little bit of extra confidence about what that was going to look like on the day helped me so much to be able to sort of feel like I could dip my toe into things that were harder, have a little bit more confidence. I probably had more confidence sometimes, I think, in those years than I do now. Just that little bit of naivety of not really knowing exactly what was coming and just throwing myself into it. So, I found myself on a photo shoot one day, doing some promos with a figure skater who was at the University of Utah, that would then be displayed on the sides of buildings when it came time for the games. I had no awareness of that. I was just like, I was on the ice with her. We were doing this photo shoot. I was learning how that gets done, to figuring out how to manage these volunteers. And, my particular role was to run the training venue for figure skating and short track speed skating. So I sort of had this perfect storm of an opportunity to understand all those components of a venue and venue management, but doing it at the training venue where we weren't going to have a ton of spectators, and we weren't, going to have maybe all the components that would be at the competition venue. But, fast forward to when the games happened, and we just happened to be a part of, in our sport, a major judging scandal that happened at the games. And so what we thought was going to be this sort of small operation at this training venue became kind of a breeding ground for the media and broadcasters and people to kind of get access to some of what was happening. So very quickly it turned on a dime, and it was sort of a bigger role and responsibility for a couple of days there than I anticipated. So it really gave me out of the gate, just an opportunity and a team of people who had confidence enough in me and had trained me well enough that they let me do it, and that is something I'll always be grateful for, because it really was sort of sink or swim. But I knew I had a support system there, and all of us together just did this cool thing. So yeah, it was really exciting.
What were some of the skills that you developed during that time?
Wow, yeah, great question. I think certainly leadership, in a huge way, being able to sort of step into that and know that what you had to say was important, how you said it was important, how you lead a team is important. I think I did some great things there. I made some mistakes there. I had an opportunity to really learn that the way that you lead really, really matters for the experience of the people that you're leading and for the ultimate goal. So I think that was a really huge one. All the components of how to run a venue, how people enter that venue, how you secure that venue, how you negotiate contracts to use the space, how you set up the spaces inside, how you create experiences for those client groups that are coming in, all have to sort of live and exist in this space. And oftentimes you don't want these populations interacting with one another. So you have to figure out how to map that venue so that everybody has their place and everybody has their flow and everybody can get where they need to be to do their jobs or to compete or whatever it is, but that they're also safe and that they're, having a good experience. And so it really was about learning how to kind of put that map together. And so a lot of those skill sets of organization, putting a run of show together or a production schedule or a daily run sheet, all of those things that it matters minute to minute what's happening. All of those skills were really gained as a foundation in Salt Lake, and I've used them ever since then.
It's interesting that in answering that question, you led with leadership. Can you talk to the importance of developing people?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I just don't think there's anything more important than investing in the people that we're working around and amongst, whether that's people that we are reporting into or people that are reporting into us. We're all part of this ecosystem, and the experience that each one of us have as individuals make us as strong as we're going to be. We're only as strong as the sum of our parts, right? So for me, that just became so important straight away, probably because I had such great leaders. I was very, very lucky in that way. to have leaders who empowered me, gave me confidence, listened. That's a key thing, right? Of being able to hear what it was that I either wanted or that I was struggling with or what I was trying to accomplish, really listening to that and giving me the tools to do it and then getting out of my way, right? And so those are really, for me, it became so clear that without that leadership piece, the rest just doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen well, or it's not a good experience. So it's impossible thing to get right all the time. And I haven't always been perfect, I'm sure, but it's something that I definitely enjoy. It's something that I try to place the priority emphasis on any, opportunity that I get to be in any kind of leadership role. So to me, it's mission critical.
Yeah. For women who are watching this evening that do not have a leader who is hands-on and initiates developing them, what action do you suggest they do or take to initiate that type of mentorship or development, whether it's through getting feedback or guidance?
Yeah, it's great. We don't all get lucky enough to have that opportunity necessarily to have a fantastic leader or mentor right in our direct path, So sometimes I think, you kind of got to make do with what you have. I think communication is really key. Being able to learn the language and the vernacular to ask for what you want, to show the way that you want to be led. Sometimes it is about that. Sometimes it's about managing up, and sometimes you might have to find something on the side. It may not be your direct report. It may not be, the person that you see every day, but it's somebody who can guide and mentor you. And you can find that, in other programs, in other people that by networking, by joining. Now, I feel like, the pandemic has done so many things that are difficult, but it's also given us an opportunity to connect across, states, cities, industries, whatever it may be, in different ways. And so sometimes it's about finding that person that can help you and mentor you so that you can create what you want inside the space where you are. I think first and foremost, if you're under a leader or someone who's doing you damage, then that's different than just maybe not having it exactly the way you want it. So I think being able to discern that and knowing when you might be in a position where you need to move on. It's not always going to work. It's not always going to be good for you. And there are so many people, I think, fantastic and amazing leaders out there. There's just no point in spending time under somebody who's not valuing you. We just don't need to do that as women, especially anymore. Where we can, we need to make sure that's not happening.
Certainly. So after that experience, what area did you carve out to develop as your area of expertise?
I sometimes still consider myself a little bit of a generalist, to be honest. After Salt Lake, I did carry on in the Olympic Games. I really got bit by the bug, let's say, of Olympic experience and Olympism and all of those things. And so I saw before me an opportunity to go and live in all these different countries and work amongst cultures that I knew nothing about, and that was going to open up the world to me in a way that I could never have imagined. And so it really became my path. And so for me, it was about being able to get onto that next organizing committee in some way, or with an organization that would allow me, to work in another Olympic Games. And so I really kind of stayed in that operations piece more than anything else, and segued a little bit too into operational readiness, which, in sort of the corporate world, you'd look at as C3 or business continuity. In the event world, we look at that as being ready to operate. And so we run through a number of exercises and walkthroughs, operationally getting everybody together at a table, both internal with our external partners, and really talking through scenarios, those sort of what ifs, and how we would work through those so that we really solidify our operations, our communications, the way that we're going to function in normal operations and in abnormal operations. And that really kind of became a niche for me. And I've done that in a couple of games and other major events now as well, alongside of that real kind of venue management piece. So those two things combined are really, I would say, what my niche is. But that said, I've worked in the sponsorship side. I've, dabbled in the sports side, obviously in Salt Lake. So, it's sort of anything within that big footprint, I'm game for, but really that real operational piece is kind of where I land the most.
What area was most surprising to you that you had no idea existed within the Olympics?
Yeah, I would probably say this kind of operational readiness piece. It wasn't something I really thought about. You think about sports management or sport, and you think of what's happening on the field of play, what's happening in the stands, the broadcast, the media, all of the things that we know go into making these events come to life and to showcasing them, certainly to live to TV or whatever it may be. But we don't really think about what's happening to get to that point and what happens when it doesn't go to plan. What are we doing to really prepare? You can never imagine the things that are going to happen. If I thought about all the little things that have happened in an event that I never planned for, that's the majority of things. You just cannot plan for the things that are going to hit you. But what you can plan for is how you're going to communicate, which is almost the key to everything if something goes wrong, right? Down to literally who's gonna, who finds out that information? Who do they tell it to? How do they do it? Do they pick up a phone? Do they pick up a radio? What are they saying? What are they not saying? All of those things are so critical to being able to respond on a dime and keep people safe and keep the operations moving forward. And so that was really something I wasn't aware of, and kind of fell into and has become so critically important for everything I do, not just in my professional life, but sometimes in my personal life. Anywhere else is just sort of being ready for everything and having that ability to kind of be a fixer has really played well for me. So that was probably a surprise.
I'm sure all of your friends want you on the planning committee, whether it's the baby shower or the family Thanksgiving dinner, family reunions. We have to have Bev on the committee. She's going to organize it well and map out a plan if anything that goes wrong.
Yeah, I'm ready now. I always say nothing else could surprise me. It absolutely could, but at this point, I'm sort of always ready, like always, ready to respond. So yeah, it's often that even on more of the fun things that I'm kind of put into that role. So it's fine with me.
How do you remain cool, calm, and collected during the chaos?
It's literally that you've probably heard it 1,000 times, and the people on this webinar have probably heard it 1,000 times of, where it's like a swan is on the top of the water looking beautiful and underneath is literally chaos. And I think that is probably pretty indicative of even how I feel in those moments where, outwardly it's about taking a deep breath. It's about pausing before you respond. It's about thinking about what you're going to say before you say it. All of those things when really in my mind, my brain is like, oh my God, just as much as anybody else. But, I think over time you do develop those skills that make you very practical in those moments, that make you realize that even in all the situations that you have a split second. You have a split second. Think, go, so it's really about just trying to keep yourself as calm as possible so that outwardly people around you, that just permeates. And if you're calm, people are more calm responding. And then just trying to make the best decision that you can with what you have to make that decision on. And then just being okay with that. It's not always going to be the right decision. It's not always going to be the best decision, but it's the best decision for that moment with the information that you have. So if you can kind of be confident in that, it lets you calm down and to remain, at least outwardly calm for the people that are with you.
Is there a situation or story that you can share with us to illustrate how you handle crisis?
Sure. There's probably a few. I think, I go back to just because it's not funny, but it's a little bit funny in hindsight and it was so straight out of the gate for me in Salt Lake. So I was at the training venue and we were an evacuation point for the opening closing ceremonies because they were happening almost literally across the street, right? So, we had been doing a lot of training with Secret Service. This was pretty soon, honestly, after 9/11. And so it was very heightened awareness on security and other things like that. So, we had sort of been doing all these exercises and were prepared for what we thought, could be anything that would come our way. And on the very first day of training, we're in the venue. We have the U.S. team on both figure skating and short track. So we had 2 ice surfaces there those teams were on the ice. We had some media there. We had a lot of coaches. We had other athletes. We had volunteers. The venue was going. It was like the first day, first moment. Everybody's kind of nervous and jittery, but so excited. And our venue commander at that venue that day said, "Hey, can you just follow me for a second? Like, just stay behind me, look over my right shoulder, and just come with me." I'm like, "Okay," like just still not really putting anything together. He looks out, maybe 20 feet from the entrance of our venue is a security checkpoint where media are entering into the venue. And he says, "What do you see on the ground there?" And I said, "Well, kind of looks like a pipe. It's kind of capped on both ends, that's not good. And that's not what we want to see, obviously." And he said, "I agree, and I'm going to act on it. I need you to move everybody away." There's literally glass windows in front of this whole piece between me, the security checkpoint, and the media coming in, a wall of glass. There's coaches leaning against it on cell phones, the last thing you want. There's, you name it. Everybody is sort of in that space. Volunteers there, the whole thing. And so it was like, all right, it was my job to kind of keep everybody inside away from this situation, and his job to kind of take care of everything outside. And so we did it. We parted ways. And in my head, I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get all these volunteers out of here? I don't want people to see what's going to happen outside, because while I think we're okay, it's probably going to be a scene, So it was really a matter of the kind of people that were working directly with me just saying, "Listen, we're going to give these volunteers an opportunity they didn't think they were going to get, because we kept telling them, you got to do your job. You can't watch, we're here to do an event here, and we have jobs to do." And so we sort of said to them, "Listen, it's day one. We're going to give you a gift. We're going to move you inside. You're going to get to watch, this is the moment, like, take advantage of it." And so we got them all in there. I hear from the venue commander that there's going to be that they're going to detonate this thing just to get rid of it. It's not what we think it is, but we're just going to get rid of it and be safe. And so it's going to make some noise, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're then communicating to people in the venue, "Listen, the opening ceremonies are, within the next day. They're testing some pyro there. Don't worry, you're probably going to hear something. It's okay. Nothing to do with us. Carry on." And so it was just one of those moments of like, split second, you gotta come up with something. You gotta keep people safe. You gotta keep them away from the situation. You gotta believe that the people who are responsible, our venue commanders and security teams, are doing what they need to do. If something else escalates, they're gonna let you know, but just move with it. And so that's what we did, and it ended up totally fine. And we laughed about it certainly later and for the days following that. But it was a pretty quick right to it. Did not have that experience and had to just operate. So since then, there's been other things, but that one probably will stick with me the most.
I'm sure. So that was your first Olympics, not your seventh.
Yeah, no, first day, day one. Yeah, and day one Olympics one.
Oh my goodness. That is really scary. You have to not only solve the problem, but everyone else around you has to feel comfortable. So you're doing it without harming other people.
Right. Yeah, you just want to just not trigger anybody else. And, at the end of the day, they probably had a little bit of a better experience than they would have that day, where they were just standing on their posts and that's that. So, maybe it was a bit of a gift for them at the end of the day. But, trying to make lemonade out of lemons, I guess, is really where we were. But really having that first priority be everyone's safety and making sure that we were within those bounds and getting creative on the other side of it.
Wow. Well, Bev, earlier you mentioned that after your internship with the Utah Winter Olympics, you always work to get on another organizing committee. Can you explain for our audience just the Olympic structure and the relationship between the International Olympic Committee and the local organizing committees?
Sure, absolutely. I think you could take a super deep dive on that and, have a whole show on that. So I'll just keep it pretty high level. But essentially, there is the International Olympic Committee, and obviously they host, the whole ideals of Olympism. They have a host city contract that the cities who bid on and are eventually awarded the games follow, right? But the host committee itself, so the entity that is within the city, hosts the games. And so they become the official organizing committee, as it were. And so, those are usually made up of a combination of people with a background in maybe Olympics, but certainly in event management and major event management, oftentimes city planners, people who are ingrained in how the city really runs and operates and works. A lot of local, people come in both as staff on the organizing committee, but also as volunteers. And so it's a really local entity, as it were. And it's almost like a startup. That's kind of how I equate it to, is that, it's this organization that has about a 7-year duration, right? So from the moment that they're awarded the games until the opening ceremony day is about 7 years. And it's sort of this big peak up, and then it ends, right? Pretty straight away after the Olympics and then the Paralympics. You have a little bit of a wrap up and you're done. And when you're done, you're done. That then turns into what you hope for a city as a legacy program, where the venues are utilized. Maybe World Cups come to that city and utilize those venues. But for the organizing committee, it really just peters off and it's done. And then the next city that has the games is also creating an organizing committee. And so, in order to be able to do that, there's a couple of ways. I mean, some people work for the National Olympic Committee, like the United States Olympic Committee, and they probably maybe they've done 20 games in that way. They are employed full-time with the United States Olympic Committee or the International Olympic Committee, and they're sort of going from games to games and looking at that real overarching piece. If you're on the organizing committee, it ends, and there's really no guarantee that you would do the next one or could do the next one. So it's a lot of being able to network and find your way in again into that city. And oftentimes it's in a country that you don't speak the language. You may not be very connected into that city, and so it can be difficult. There are other agencies as well that offer opportunities to work on the games. There's the TV side of things, the media side. There's so many little avenues, into that would kind of engage with the organizing committee itself. But that organizing committee is really kind of responsible for planning that event in that city and making that project the best it can be for that city's games.
And understanding that language is a huge barrier as it relates to working in another country. How did you position and pitch yourself in front of organizing committees outside of the US?
Yeah, it's a great question. I very luckily partnered with organizations who really kind of did that hard part ahead of my arrival there in many cases. So back, after Salt Lake, I worked for a small consultancy that we did organizational readiness. So that kind of, crisis management planning piece for both Athens and Torino. And, those contracts came with that organization, and I was a part of that contract, right? So that's often how it would be done, is that you would be on a tender or an RFP, something like that, that would be awarded a piece of work that you are then a part of that team. So that was certainly the case there. It was the case when I worked in Sochi in Russia. In London, I worked directly for the organizing committee, and that was the same way you would go in and work, in an organization where you applied through a resume for a position and got hired, So it often works like that. You can submit your resume like you would in any other organization, and you go through the interview process, and if you get the role, you get the role, So I just kind of played it by ear in each case, in each iteration, and entered in the way that I thought would be the best opportunity for me to grow a little bit each time I did the games, and also to be able to utilize the expertise that I had gained for the next Olympic city.
Very interesting. So what has been your favorite Olympics?
It's impossible. It's really impossible. I mean, people say that all the time. Obviously, Salt Lake's dear to my heart because it was in my own country. It was the first one. I was working in a sport that I had grown up in, but I adored living in London. I mean, there could not be anything better. I just absorbed every minute of that city. The games were amazing and beautiful. Vancouver was stunning. Russia was an experience of its own, running an Olympic Games there in a language I spoke none of. I ate my way through Italy. I mean, you name it. Like it just, there's no way to pinpoint my favorite one. There's favorite moments from each one, but it's sort of like asking like, who's your favorite child? You know, you just can't do it.
Well, I want to go back to Russia. Did not know the language. How did you survive?
By a woman named Daria. I'll tell you that. She was our kind of right-hand woman. She was our interpreter. She sat in meetings. She, you know, told us exactly everything that was happening. She helped us open bank accounts. She helped us find places to live. She told us the rules, what aren't the rules, all the things. So we leaned so heavily on her, and it was, you know, make it or break it. Also, the team of Russian locals that I was working with there were amazing. They had beautiful, perfect English. You know, I often in these countries feel so guilty that I just want to be able to speak the language. I'm in their culture, I'm in their country, and they're speaking English to me, and it's frustrating, but they were amazing that way. And I did take some Russian, and I learned just a tad. I mean, it's so hard to really be able to embrace that, but I did have a woman who was on our team who, by the time we got to the games, she's American as well, and she was speaking Russian on the radio. I mean, just kudos to her, like just such a champ in that way. And so I didn't quite make it that far, but it was really just being able to rely on people that I spent a lot of time building relationships with while I was there.
What's the most unique thing you've eaten?
Eaten?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. That's probably something in China. Like some animal that you're not supposed to eat. Not a dog, but definitely there were some insects, some things like that I probably got a little adventurous with in Beijing, which is great. I do it again. It's super fun.
My goodness. Oh, so after all of your experience with the Olympics, 8 different Olympics, you're now getting ready for Tokyo.
Yeah, you know, I transitioned out about in the middle of 2019. So I am now still involved, but I'm working more on from stateside, right? So I am working on the Olympic trials, track and field, in preparation for Tokyo. So I am not going to the big show this time. I mean, obviously with the pandemic, things are really different. And I'm excited about, you know, being able to put my hands in the Olympic trials, which is not something that I've had that many opportunities to work on, a few, but not quite as many. And so it's a really cool experience to get to kind of help make that possible for those athletes to be named to the team. So that's coming up in June in Portland, and looking very forward to that.
And what does that entail for you?
So for me, I'm working sort of as a consultant in one aspect and then as an operator in another. So for this planning phase, I'm working in a consultancy position, helping them kind of navigate some of the workshops that they're doing to prepare for the games, to prepare their teams. With COVID, it's a very different situation. You're almost planning 3 or 4 events at once, you know, the sort of who are you bubbling, who are you not, you know, are you having spectators, are you not? How much media is going to be there or not, based on a lot of different decisions that are being made kind of as we speak. So I'm just kind of helping to navigate where I can be useful in that way. And then when the event comes along, I'll actually be in their venue operations center, kind of running that, you know, room full of operators and handling communication and issue resolution and all of those things that may come up. So I kind of put on my operational hat when we get to June, and then for those 3 weeks, I'll be there with phones and radios and people all around and making whatever we have to make happen.
Yeah, very cool, Bev.
Yeah, it's exciting.
With your work, working on the global stage, I'm curious about your thoughts on using sports for diplomacy.
It's an excellent question. I think there's so much opportunity there for that. You know, sport is a universal language in many cases. You know, people coming out, whether they're participating in the sport, just excited by the sport, inspired by the sport, whatever it may be, it's people coming together. It's about inspiration. It's about connection. You know, those things really speak to me. And from a diplomacy standpoint, so many of us as citizens in all these different countries are the same, and so coming together on something that bonds us, and being able to have conversation around that and dialogue around that. I think it's the sport that's just the glue of that, and when we try to look at that around politics and things like that, it can be a little more controversial or divided or all these things. But when we look at it around something like sport or culture or art or any of those things where it's a common bond that brings us together, something that we're looking at in the center, but that we have dialogue around, I think the possibilities are endless. I've seen that myself, sitting in a cafeteria in an Olympic village and watching, two countries who might be politically separated or divided or fighting, sitting together and having a meal and as athletes and bonding together and talking about, the field of play that day or the track or the whatever it is, right? And their experience around that. And that just feels so human to me. And so I just think it is very powerful, the possibilities that can happen around sport.
What was your biggest frustration working on Olympics?
I think sometimes, honestly, speaking very candidly, the grandiosity of it. I think for some cities that's really, really hard. I think it doesn't always lend for the best legacy. I think when those programs are emphasized and prioritized, it can be a really, really amazing thing. What happens in the years, after the Olympic Games. But it's a disruption and it's big and it can be cumbersome. And so I think that was a challenge for me was being able to ride that line, that divide of the cities that are really able to do it and the ones that maybe struggle, and how can we help, navigate that. And I did have the opportunity to work in sort of a knowledge management capacity and through the IOC's Olympic Agenda 2020, trying to make it more sustainable and just listening to those conversations and the things that are being discussed about making that happen in future games iterations, I think is so important. And so, that takes a little bit of that struggle and challenge away, knowing that there are good minds really working on that.
Well, I see that we're already getting close to time. I said we could have an episode on each of your Olympics and then your entrepreneurship endeavors. But with that,
yeah.
I know that we want to talk about Live Alive. Where did that idea birth from?
Live Alive, really, the idea for it started when I was in London, 2012, so working for the Olympic Games there, and kind of realizing that there was a bit of a shelf life of moving around to different countries every 2 years. Like I had this kind of a really amazing professional life and a sort of built-in group of friends that were in all these cities, but I really, I couldn't keep a plant alive. I didn't have, a home of my own. And I just thought, well, what's next after this? And how am I going to get to that? And so I just voiced that to a few of my other friends, colleagues, and they were feeling the same way. And so we were like, there's a way we can formalize this, where we can get together, we can, put each other as a focus for each session and talk about what the next steps are, how we're going to get there, and how we can encourage each other and keep each other accountable to do those things, right? So one of us was working in the same way I was, but was very interested in stand-up comedy, honestly, And so we're like, you're living in London, we can do this, And so she did a number of things, and fast forward, a year later, I saw her in Toronto in a stand-up comedy open mic, which she won. It was amazing. Another woman that was working on this with us wanted to start a business with her husband. They did that. It's established. I really wanted to work kind of on an opening and closing ceremony. That was just really something that spoke to me. It was creative, a little bit more than just the operational piece. I wanted to do that in the States. I kind of wanted to, figure out how I could navigate a family. Fast forward, I was able to work the opening and closing ceremonies in Los Angeles for the Special Olympics World Games. It was an amazing experience. And, 2 years after that, I met my husband. I'm now married. I have 2 stepchildren. So it just was a thing that worked. And I thought, this is something, right? It is the way that we formalized it, the way that we got together, but we didn't just drink wine. We also did the things, we followed the plan. We removed obstacles for each other. We gave each other confidence. We held each other accountable, and we made things happen, and we moved from A to B. So it just became something that I wanted to bring to a wider audience, and something that the more conversations I had, I realized people and women in particular needed that. And so it just became kind of my passion project and mission to make this happen. And Live Alive came to my mind because it was about, moving out of our own way and doing those things we really want to do that make us feel more alive. And so that's where Live Alive was born.
So what does Live Alive work to accomplish now?
So now we launched actually last year, January of 2020. So an interesting year to launch something, but could never been more needed than when you're going into a global pandemic. But it really works to bring women together into what I call purposeful accountability cohorts. So we're a network of purposeful accountability groups. And when I say purposeful accountability, that's really about aligning our goal setting with what our values are, being able to recognize and identify those values, being able to kind of narrow those down to a life theme that becomes our due north. And so when we're making decisions and setting goals based on a life theme, it's always we're going to have more passion about it. The likelihood that we're going to achieve it is much higher, right? And then when we set a framework where we're really focusing on one individual every session, so every person is focused on for a full hour, this is what my plan is, creating action maps of what success looks like for them based on where they are now, and then just creating step by step, and helping each other remove the things that are in the way, giving resources, supporting one another. Now if, Shivanya, you and I were doing this, I would know what you're working on this week. And when I see something that triggers, hey, Shivanya's working on that, I'm sending it to you. I'm making sure you made that call. I'm doing those things. And so it's just really about, being more open with what we're working on, getting rid of the comparison factor, knowing that we're all vulnerable and we all struggle and nothing is linear, but we can support each other in moving from A to B.
And what has been some of the feedback that you've received already?
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. It really has. I hoped that it would work, to be honest. When you put something out there, you just hope it would work. And to see some of the goals come to life, and to just really hear at the end of the day, people building trust enough to say to one another, you know what, I see you struggle with this a lot. I'm just noticing this thing. I don't want to overstep, but I'm just noticing this thing. And for someone else to be like, you're exactly right. And I can feel safe to talk about that here. And let's figure out how to remove it. You're going to do this one thing this week to start to remove it. We've had that happen. We've had somebody who was terrified, about some health concerns that were going on, and just being able to support them to just see the doctor, just do it, and realize that she's going to be just fine. They're just all these kind of things that have happened that I think go so much beyond moving us forward professionally or even just personally, but about building systems of trust and really those just networks of people who are on your side. So it's just been really, really phenomenal to watch that happen, and to hear some of the goals that people are coming up with are beyond me. It's incredible. So I'm really excited about where it's going.
Awesome. Well, I want to go over to a question really quick.
Sure.
And it is, what would you say to a minority high school or college student aspiring to intern, work, or volunteer for the Olympics?
Yeah, wonderful question. Well, the good news is that even though it's a little bit farther away, we have an Olympic Games that's happening here in the States in 2028. So in Los Angeles, there's an Olympic Games coming. So you've got about 7 years, right, to work through that. And I think, start volunteering, look and find events that are happening in if you're here in Atlanta, there are opportunities all the time to kind of, work on an event. It doesn't matter how small it is. It doesn't matter how big it is. Just get some of that event knowledge, volunteer for a nonprofit, a fundraiser, anything like that, where you can kind of start to understand how an event works. What's the pulse of an event? What are the different, components, whether it's transportation or catering or, whatever. I mean, decor or design, all these things that kind of come together, gain that experience. And then just keep researching, start looking at events that are around the Olympic Games in Los Angeles in 2028, or, things that happen here. I mean, we just had the Super Bowl, right? We had the All-Star Game, things like that will come up. And Atlanta Sports Council is a good place to look. Seek out people like me on LinkedIn and just bug us, keep hitting hitting us up for conversations and being able to show you opportunities, or maybe where we have an opportunity for an intern or a volunteer, but just kind of gain that experience. And then, if there's a real opportunity that comes up, you've got something there to submit on your resume and get it in there and get your foot in the door, and then the world will open up to you. So there's tons of opportunity there. I think we lost Shivanya, so I'm happy to take any other questions if anyone has them. Let's see, any others? There's probably a follow-on to that question too. There are even starting to be some university programs in event management. So I would do some research on that. And when I was in college and university, majoring in events or anything like that was not an option on the table. It just wasn't. It wasn't there. And so, now that is so much more of an opportunity to, whether it's hospitality or event management or whatever it may be. There are organizations like International, I think it's International Live Event Society now, that has a lot of good information. WISE, Women in Sport and Events, that Shivanya and I are both members of, is a great place to do that. Join WISE, you'll meet all kinds of people that can probably really help you navigate internships and just learning from some of the best.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Let's see, do we have any other questions? Oh, here's one more question. We'll take one more. Oops. What was the defining moment when you knew you were right where you wanted to be in your career?
Oh, great question. I'm not sure I even have ever hit that, honestly. I mean, there have been moments where I knew I was right where I wanted to be. Any of the Olympic Games I did, the minute that opening ceremony happened, I knew I was right where I wanted to be. But there's always opportunity to grow. There's always opportunity for other things coming in. So, I can't say I'm ever been in a place where I'm like, this is it, I'm here. There's always something more to aspire to, and more to learn about. So, but I've had those moments, few and far between, but I've definitely had them, and it's really impactful when it happens.
Great. Any closing words, Bev? How can we find you and get more information about Live Alive?
Sure, absolutely. You can find me. I'm on Instagram, Live Alive series, and Bev Carey. Also Carey Communications. That's my event business. I'm on LinkedIn as Bev Carey. You can find me there. I think it's Beverly Carey actually, but if you put Bev Carey, you'll find me. And on Facebook, we have a Live Alive Facebook group. So look for that and, hit me up, and I'm happy to get you in that and let you join there. And then you can find out more information at livealiveseries.com as well.
Thank you so much, Bev. I appreciate you being on this evening. I also appreciate your patience. I apologize for the technical difficulties we encountered this evening. I know
no problem.
Work in events and we have a reputation of fixing problems. So, we have to continue to work through any fires.
That's right. No problem. I think we come to expect it now in this world, this technology COVID world. It's always a gamble, but it was great to be on. I really appreciate it. So fun talking to you, and I look forward to more opportunities and to having you next week at our 4 Women, 4 Stories. It's you can find more information about that at livealiveseries.com. Come join us, and you'll get to hear Shivanya not just interview, but be interviewed.
Yes. Really excited. So before we close out, there are just the 3 sentences that I need you to complete for us.
Okay.
The first one is, the book about the life of Beverly Carey will be titled.
The book about the life of Beverly Carey will be titled Live Alive and Keep Learning.
Love it. That is great. I'm going to pull out my ice skates when I have the opportunity to skate here.
I'll pull my skates out. it's a little bit iffy, I'm not on the ice as much now, but anytime I can I used to joke that I wish that the world was made of ice, and that would be so much easier for me to get where I needed to go. So I'll welcome that at any time.
And finally, you will catch me doing car karaoke to this song.
Probably anything Beyonce, I would say. So you had Run the World going when we first logged on here, and so that's really stuck in my brain. I'm singing that at the top of my lungs usually most days. So I think that's probably where I would land. There's a million other things, but if I'm gonna sing it at the top of my lungs, I mean, it's got to be Queen Bee, right?
Right. Thank you again, Beverly. It was so nice to see you this evening. I'm really looking forward to the partnership with Live Alive and just helping more women elevate their game and win in business and life. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
And thank you, SHEMAKERS, for joining us for episode 8. I again apologize for the technical difficulties we had this evening and hope that you all still enjoyed our conversation with Beverly Carey and got a lot of good notes for your playbook. Remember, you do not just have to wait until Wednesday to join Hills and Helmets. We are wherever you are. You can connect with Hills and Helmets on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. What's next? Well, get ready to learn about women in politics. Our guest for episode 9 is Tasha Cole. She is the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Diversity Officer for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Tasha has worked with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. She's also worked with lawmakers on the Hill. So definitely save the date and join us next week as we have a conversation with Tasha about using our voice and getting more women to run for office. In addition to her professional roles, she does serve on the board of an organization that works to develop high school young girls to encourage them to run for office. Thank you again for joining us for tonight's episode. Remember, you are a SHEMAKER, and I am here to help you get in the end zone and win. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Good night.